Okay, hello everyone. My name is Austin. I am a photography tutor online. And here I want to go through some photos that were taken off of Reddit. Let's take a look real quick right here. We got the first one right here is from The Perfect Mundo. They posted onto r/photo critique. And kind of want to go through and take a look at some of what's in this photo and what's working for it and maybe how we can improve it perhaps. So first thing I notice here when I'm looking at this is it feels far away. The likelihood is when you were standing here, you saw this cable car down here and you probably thought, whoa, this is really cool. There's this gap in the trees right here, and there's these lines of cable cars going through, and this looks like a good place to take a picture. You took the picture and you probably looked at it later on and thought, gosh, it just feels so tiny and insignificant. A lot of people feel this when they get into photography the first time. For example, they'll see a picture of the moon, or they'll actually be out and see the moon and it's super big that night, and they'll take out their phone, take a picture of it, and then maybe a week later when they share it with their friends, it looks really insignificant. Kind of that effect may have happened right here. So how do we get that sense of scale back? Well, one big way to do it is to crop the image. We'll look at that later on, because first I want to do some of the general edits that might help a photo along. First, let's look at composition. Composition here. Okay, so I'm going to draw some lines on this. All right, so when we have a photograph, we generally want to send the viewer of the photograph, send their eye to the most interesting places in the photograph. And typically when a person is looking at a photograph, if they were to play peekaboo with it, i.e. they look at it for the first time, their eye will immediately be sent to certain areas. And from that initial point that they start at, they'll move along lines in the photograph. So for example, if the first time I looked at this photograph, I looked here, where would my eye go from there? Well, it could follow a path like this along this line right here, and it could find this, and it may go this way, it may go that way. If we started here, it may go this way, and along here, maybe to the left, and maybe along here. We have to ask ourselves, is this an enjoyable journey for the viewer of the photograph? And if you started here, the answer is probably no. You'd be missing out on all the cool stuff up here, right? So how do we move the viewer's eye up and away? It's a really difficult question, and answering it is quite the problem to solve when you're learning photography for the first time. So let's try it. I'm gonna delete this mask. Okay, so how do we get our viewer's eye going in the right direction? When a person looks at a photograph for the first time, they'll typically look at the brightest thing, number one. Number two, the most contrasty thing, contrasty being areas of super brightness and super darkness where they clash together. Number three, they'll probably focus on areas of the highest detail. So things like this. However, in a photograph like this where there's a ton of that stuff, we tend to put that out of our minds so it doesn't stick out to our brain the first time we look at it. And then some more like secondary and tertiary things are things like faces. Sometimes people will immediately focus on the face of a photograph in particular, and that will typically be the starting point. Eyes. Eyes are another thing that draws your attention. In this photograph, for me, the area that draws my attention the most is right here and here. These are the two most likely spots that my eye is going to start when I look at this photograph. And it's likely going to follow these lines. And I want to stop that from happening because I find this journey unfulfilling. I want to look at this, but this is distracting my brain right here. How can we stop that from happening? Well, let's try. Remember I said bright areas cause us to look at them. Let's darken this area here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the masks here and I'm going to make what's called a linear gradient. This is basically you drag from one point and you drag to another point, and it makes a selection of the photograph. So for example, this red hued area is being selected for editing. And when I change these sliders right here, it's going to affect only the red hued area. I'll show you what I mean. So if I turn this exposure slider up, only that red area will get brightened. If I turn it down, this area will get darkened. You have to be careful with these things though too, because sometimes our edits can look not so realistic. So keep that in mind going forward. Generally, this area here is too bright for the amount of attention I feel it's getting. So I would want to probably take highlights down. These sliders right here control different areas of the photograph. For example, exposure is areas of all brightness in it. So if exposure down, exposure up, we are set to a mask right now currently, so it will only affect the area that I previously assigned. Contrast is how contrasty an image is. So if I turn this up, areas that are already bright will get brighter, and areas that are already dark will get darker. The opposite will happen if I turn this the other direction. Contrasty areas tend to catch our eye, so I'll turn contrast down for this area. Highlights, this is the one I moved earlier. Highlights changes the brightness of the generally bright areas. So as I move this up and down, you'll see that the brick face that is kind of caught in light there is mostly getting affected. I'm going to turn this down because I don't want to look at that brick face. I want to look somewhere else. Shadows, this is generally the darker areas of a photograph. So if I boost them, you'll see the darker areas will get a little bit brighter. And a lot of people like this look right here of highlights down and shadows up. It kind of gives you details in everything. But it's not always the best way to edit photography, although it is quite popular to have all the details be visible, especially in HDR photography. In fact, that's the entire point of HDR photography. Shadows, what if we turn it down? So making it shadowier, right? Yeah. This is good for a couple of reasons. Shadows down in this area makes it so that this area is not only darker and less eye-catching, but it also makes it so that the 3D-ness of the photo starts to show itself. And our human eyes can look we have two eyes, so we can see in 3D. Camera does not though. So it can only see in the 2D. And that's part of the reason why when you're in a place that feels amazing and you're looking at it like, wow, I should take a picture of this, you get a sense of disappointment when you take the photo and look at it and it's flat all of a sudden. You're like, well, this doesn't do any justice to actually being there. And I don't think a camera ever will do any justice to actually being somewhere. So yeah, let's go with this edit for now. Let's send our viewer to this area, to the cable car. At least attempt to. So I'm going to make a new mask right here in Lightroom. I'm going to make a brush. I'm going to scroll up to make it nice and big. I want to send my viewer over here. So generally, probably I want to make this area brighter, right? And we can do that with this brush, and then we can exposure up on it. I'm going to go easy on it. I don't want to go too much like this. It looks like a weird spotlight and it looks blotchy. Also, if you go too much here, it will blow things out. It looks like the photo got bleached, and that just looks like damaged photography. We want to generally avoid that. Okay, that's pretty good right there. Notice how these areas over here are getting darker and the areas over here near the area that we are interested in are getting brighter. And it's more likely now that when someone looks at this photograph, they'll be sent to this area. Now, these are all fine edits and whatnot. We can try a couple more. Let's try something else. What if you wanted to do a radial gradient instead of the brush? In fact, I'll delete this other one. Delete mask 2. There we go. So I'll do the radial brush, or gradient, excuse me. Pull from the center and it comes out like this. And this you can have a more perfect circle when you draw it out. Exposure up. I like this a little bit more than the brush earlier, so I'm going to go with that. A vignette is also a very popular way of doing this. If you go down to, let's see here. Here it is. Post-crop vignetting. So this amount slider right here, if we turn this down, it will vignette the edges of the photograph. Now, old cameras and old lenses would have this effect much stronger back in the day, so it kind of adds a old equipment style feel to it. And depending on what you're going for, you may or may not want to do that. In fact, a lot of people may use this just to correct any vignetting by reversing it like this. But it's actually quite good at sending your viewer's eye to the place where you want them to be. So I'm going to add just a little bit right there. Another thing I'm going to do is, because this, I don't even know what this is, this metal truss here has a bright area on it with these pillars and the metal going across, it's taking over a lot of the viewer's eye. I want to move the viewer's eye away from this and up to the cable car. Let's try another way. What if someone's eye were moving along here, and instead of going up here, they wanted to go up here? Their eye wanted to go up there. How could we do that? How could we make it so that the viewer's eye jumped this track and went up these trees? Well, a very simple way to do it is to brighten it. And I'm going to put in some splotches right here just so that it's not one single line. Let's try exposure up on that and see if it has any positive changes. I feel like it does. I feel like you could potentially be moved in this direction towards the cable car. So yeah, I might keep that edit. I might do another linear gradient down here and make an even darker patch down here. This area of the photo generally is just not contributing to any of the composition, so we can either darken it or just remove it entirely. I'm going to take a smaller portion at the bottom there, and I'm going to turn it down. And we can adjust this more or less later on. Okay, so those are a couple edits that may work for this shot, but I would consider for this one, since the cable car is the most interesting thing in this whole shot, I would consider a crop. I would consider taking out as much of that metal truss as possible. This may be going in a little far, but let's take a look at it and see what we come up with. I'm a pretty big proponent of the rule of thirds, and so is Adobe Lightroom by having the rule of thirds already attached to the crop overlay here. Lining up interesting subjects onto the thirds, so these lines right here, and at where they intersect, is generally a good idea as per the rule of thirds. The reason why that's the case is because if you were to divide a photograph into two halves, if you were to play peekaboo with the photograph and look at it, would you know which half you were supposed to look at? Those things kind of take away from the mental pleasure that you get when looking at a photograph. If all that work is already done for us and it's already clear where we're supposed to look, then we feel like it's better compositionally when we look at it. So I'm going to try changing this here. And yeah, I feel like that's pretty good. I, of course, downloaded this off of Reddit, so it's got some artifacting and it's not in its full quality. But I'm sure that if you were to do this, it would look even better. Yeah, that's a couple of the first ideas I would look into for editing this photograph. Give them a shot, see how it feels.